Everyone online, I guess, behave. You guys in the room are already behaving really well. So, all right. Let's start with this buyer consultation and appointment standards. So you might be wondering, I've got the templates candidates if you want to come up here to the front, or Lisa and grab them, or if you want to be friends and a good friend and grab one for your friend. As you can see, I've got them color coordinated. I unfortunately ran out of yellow paper. So you'll see in the upper right of the other two, it's kind of stating what color they're printed on. And you might be wondering, why is this chick kind of like a little loco and putting them on colored papers? The reason I do the colored paper is when I'm at an appointment and I've got a gazillion different papers in the folder for that client, when we're talking about them purchasing their house, the new house they're buying, it's easy for me when I'm flustered because there's a lot of stuff coming at me, or there's a lot of personality in the room, for me to look down while I'm still having a conversation and casually pull out the green form, which I know is the information that I took notes before on the house they want to buy. Same thing with having one that's printed on orange, and you all can print them on whatever color paper you want. I had used these colors because they worked for me. Same thing with the orange one. When I'm flustered or when I know I need to take a note, because how many of you been to an appointment, buyer consultation or a listing appointment? Can you show of hands?
It's very awkward.
Right? Awkward, uncomfortable. They're asking you questions and you're like, I don't really know. And you're trying to process your thoughts in your head while like also being like, I probably should write this down because I'm not going to remember any of this. So that is part of why the color coding, right? And then the white, you've got just a plain piece of white paper. I did run out. This is like the last piece of yellow cardstock I had in my office. But I had that one on yellow and on cardstock because it's a little harder, and I was going to be writing on it during that walkthrough at that initial appointment. Okay, so that's the reason why they're colored. But let's start with this initial buyer intake form. This came about because there's times where people would call me and say, I am ready to purchase a home. And I'd be like, oh my God, I've been waiting for this phone call for like 3 months. Like, yes, oh, cool. And I know you and you know me, and this is going to work out. This is great. And then oftentimes I would, again, get super excited and I'd be like, okay, cool. So how many beds, how many baths? And then all of a sudden, you know, that we'd start talking about that. And I'm like, okay, cool, great. Okay, how much you want to spend? And then I'd get off the phone because I was so excited and I not really have a whole lot of information to go off of, right? And I would have forgot to ask a whole bunch of questions. And even worse, it would be scratched out on the back of a receipt in my car or a notebook of mine, right? And it would be chicken scratch that at the moment I'm thinking, I'm gonna remember this. They want 3 more bedrooms. They want Blue Valley school districts, and they don't want to spend more than $250,000, right? And then I forget the whole rest of the conversation or to go back. So the reason I came up with this is that it prompts me to remember what questions to ask that buyer and that person, so that I'm able to control the conversation when maybe I am super excited or very uncomfortable. So that is part of the reason that I have the form. The other piece is that it's easy for me to come back and reference those different things later. So if it's a week and a half later, and I'm going to come back and reference how what the garage situation is, it's easy for me to find and know where to go look for that. The other beautiful thing is you all will have a point in time in which you're going to have 5 or 6 or 7 buyers at one time. And it's super easy to start to confuse what school district was important to this one and what one was important to that one and all of those different things. Okay. So we'll start out at the top here. Obviously, we're just writing their names at the top. The reason that there's a second line for legal names is because sometimes there might be a Robert Smith, but you know Robert as Bob. You've always known Robert as Bob. It's always been Bob, right? But his paperwork needs to say Robert. And so sometimes it's a way to prompt yourself to say, oh, you go by Liz, but by chance is your full name Elizabeth, and like how kind of a thing. Next to, I have 2 different lines, typically because most you're usually working with no more than 2 borrowers at a time, but a lot of times I would put the first initial and then the email for that person, second initial email for that person, same for the phone number, just to capture those if you do not already have them. I would also recommend if you think you might possibly have them, but you don't exactly know, it's good to go ahead and capture those. And it can be, hey, are you still using the Gmail account, or what's the best email for me to use for you? So I would either verify or say, what email would you prefer that go to? if you're not sure if you have their email address or not, because at the end of the day, you're wanting to set them up on a search. If you don't have their email information, that's one more thing that you have to call back and follow up on. All right. Before I get too much farther into things, up on the upper right, it says receive date. That's where I would put the date in which I got the lead. So the lead came in today, 2/7 would go up, 2022 would go up in that corner. The reason it says initial contact date or initial, it's supposed to say initial contact date, is because there's times where a lead would come in on a Monday and I may not respond to them until Tuesday or Wednesday or what, and don't do that, but the times to just note of when did I actually communicate with that lead. Okay, underneath that section that says contact record, this is often where I would just keep a scribble of, I spoke to them on this date, we're gonna go look at houses on this date and kind of keep track of maybe the last time. And those are for sometimes some of the leads that come in that are a bit colder, whether it's a sign call or somebody I met at an open house or somebody I met door knocking. It was a little more important to keep track of that contact record of the last time I talked to them was this. Okay. The box that's underneath the phone number area says lead property. You may wonder, why is there a lead property for a buyer? That would be the time that I got a sign call. I would put what that property was. It's my best friend calling me to say that they're ready to go look at a house. And they say, there was one that popped up on that website, I won't say, that we were really kind of interested in. I'd say, oh, what's that address? And then I would capture it here so that I could, get an idea of what price range that they were, that was, and what style of house, if it's turnkey, if it was a grandma house that they were going to get to update. I was just taking some note for myself there. All right, so let's get into the good stuff. Underneath that, you're going to see boxes. And again, this is how my mind systematically would work. I then would go in to start asking them about the property. So for this purposes of today, why don't we pretend as though my client's name is Jessica. So Jessica, tell me a little bit. Do you know how many beds are you looking for? Awesome. You're looking for 3 bedrooms and an office. Oh, okay, great. So do you actually need 3 bedrooms? Or if we found a cute 2-bedroom with an extra office that didn't have it was non-conforming, would that work? Sure, as long as I can work, I have to be able to work from home and I still need a guest room. So you're wanting to not just say 3 bedrooms and move on with life, right? Especially with the inventory that we have right now, guys. Same with, I want a 4-bedroom. In asking more information about how many is where you also are showing interest in them. Guys, I use this form, and this is a form that's great to stand in with a clipboard or stand in an open house with and fill out while you're talking to someone. Because the times you slow down and ask them about how they're going to use those 4 bedrooms or how they're going to use those 3 bedrooms, you're gaining information about them. I now know Jessica works from home and that's important, right? She's going to be spending a lot of time in this house. Okay, you need a guest room. Is that just for when somebody stops by, or, well, my parents live out of town and they like to come visit and I need them to have their own space, kind of a thing. So take a breath when they tell you how many bedrooms they want. It's a great opportunity to get to know more about them. Even if it's people you already know and you assume you already know about them, right? So taking a little bit of time when it comes to those bedrooms and asking how many they need and describing that a little bit is important. Sometimes people are going to say 4 would be great, but I would be okay with 3. So making a note there and saying 3 plus, prefer 4 would be what I would put in that box. Immediately asking about the number of bedrooms is where I would flow directly into what are the floor plans that you're interested in. Hey, Vince, do you want to come up and grab one of these? Guys, Vince is here. Everyone say hi to Vince.
Hello.
Also from the Plaza, licensed in Missouri?
Kansas.
Kansas. Any
We're
Missouri
working
for
on
you?
in Missouri.
There we go. You guys need to buddy up with you. All you one state people can find people in the other state. Be buddies. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Vince is a good guy. I want to make sure he can follow on. Okay, so I would immediately go into the floor plan piece. And this again is where you're looking at your client and you're trying, or your potential client, this lead, and you're asking a little bit more and you're thinking for them. Awesome. Okay, so is there a specific floor plan that you like or you don't like? Often the ones that I would try to use as an example is like a split level. Or if you've got a couple that they're maybe aging a little bit and you want to say, okay, are you looking for something where maybe we're a ranch and all the bedrooms are on the main floor? If it's somebody with small kids and you know they have small kids, or you hear, small kids in the background, where do you want those bedrooms? Do you want all your bedrooms? You said you wanted 4. Do you want all those bedrooms to be on the same floor? Or are you okay with some of them being on the first, like the master being on the main primary bedroom being on the main floor and then the other bedrooms upstairs? Again, oftentimes if people are passionate about it, they're going to speak up. Oh yeah, yeah, so we've got like Johnny, and then we also have another one. I'm expecting another one, and I want to be on the same floor as the kids. So we need to have all the bedrooms upstairs. Well, now I know I can eliminate a 1.5 story, right? And I can just take those out because they're not going to want to look at 1.5 stories where the master or the primary bedroom's on the main floor, right? Split levels, often you will get some passion from people out of mentioning a split level. It's a good time to interject a little bit of a joke, or it's a good time to educate a client. And if you don't know your floor plans either, by all means, like, let's talk about it. There's a great class on floor plans. I believe Doug Mitz trained it here recently, but often with the split levels, you're either going to get an immediate reaction out of someone like, oh, I grew up in a split level, never, ever, no, I don't want a split level. Or they're going to say, what is a split level? And oftentimes I would explain it's where you open the front door, and sometimes you have a choice you've got to make immediately. Do I want to go upstairs or downstairs? Or it's where you open the front door and I've got my living room here and then 6 stairs up and I've got like a kitchen, dining room area. And you start to describe like for them what a split level is. And oftentimes they're going to go, oh, okay, yeah, my aunt lives in one of those. Yeah, I'd be open to it. Yeah, that'd be okay. And so you know that you can include those. Does that make sense? Any questions on floor plans? Excellent. All right. And if they want a ranch, there's a difference between a ranch and a raised ranch. Raised ranch is going to be up a full flight of stairs for people, and someone that's needing no stairs, that would be important to know. Okay. Bathrooms, guys, often, okay, tell me a little bit about the bathrooms that you're looking for in this new home that you're considering. Often people will say, we want 2 bathrooms. And if you don't slow down long enough to pay and really ask the right questions, okay, so are you saying you want 2 that have ability for someone to bathe in them? Like you want 2 with like a shower, or are we okay with like 1 and then like a half bath that just has a sink and a toilet? In some of the markets, it's really important to decipher what that means. Because sometimes if you're shopping and you only really need a 1.5 bath versus a 2 full bath in their budget, you're going to open up more options. Oh no, we'd be okay as long as we had the 2, the one like with just a toilet and a bathroom. They don't all both have to have showers. So they don't always know what they're saying, right? Next, moving on into garages, obviously that's going to be where, 2+, 3+. Sometimes it's a good time to laugh too. If you know that they've already mentioned that they want to spend $300,000 and you know that area, and for them to get a 3-car garage, it's like, haha, it's a good one. We'll try, right? Next would be basement. And when you ask about basement, oftentimes I would start with the simplest form of basement. Is it important to you that you have a basement? I know that sounds silly. And yet if you can remove any crawl spaces or slabs from your search, and you're not rushing out to show somebody a house that doesn't have a basement only for them to turn to you and go, I lived in Kansas my whole life and I'm so scared of tornadoes, I have to have a basement. It's important, right? Or for storage purposes. So that would be the initial basement conversation. And if they're like, yeah, no, I need a basement, then you can continue on with, okay, tell me a little bit more. How are you going to use the basement? Do you want it to be finished or finishable? Finishable is a big word, because if someone's like, yeah, we're willing to finish it ourselves, that might open up more inventory for you. If they say we do want to have it finished, it's important to take a second too there maybe and think, even if you're just doing it internally, how do you feel about walkout versus not walkout? So, when you've got a basement that's a walkout, you have a full door you can walk out of, or you can walk up a couple of steps. Depending on the conversation and where you are, slowing down to ask those questions, like, is it important that it's a walkout? You need to have windows down there. Because if they say, we're good, like, no, it's cool. Like, I might like go down there and work out every once in a while. Or we plan to have it as an entertaining space, then maybe those windows and that walkout door are more important. And so those are things that I would be capturing here. Okay, next section I have would be going over, and I kind of would rotate through these just depending on how the conversation flowed. Backyard. Again, another place where you're like, Elizabeth, what does this mean? Tell me a little bit about the backyard and how you plan to use that. We've got small children that we want to have them running around and playing, or a play set and flat enough area for them to have a play set. Oftentimes, guys, this is where I would bring up pets and in a friendly, fun way. Tell me more about the backyard. Do we have any four-legged family members we need to be thoughtful of? Do you need a fenced-in backyard? Oh, yes, we have 2 German Shepherds, and they just like, oh man, like they really do need to get out and run, or I'm so tired of taking them out on a leash. Well, now I know when we're home searching, I need to keep in mind that it either needs to have a fence, or I need to make sure that I'm consulting them on the cost of installing a fence, right? And I now know they have 2 German Shepherds that I can then bring up later in conversation to show that I'm building rapport and I know who I'm paying attention to. Sometimes I also would talk a little bit about if they do like to entertain outside. So is that patio or that deck important to them because they really do want to entertain? The next is project level. And you might wonder what that means. Oftentimes I would lead people through this conversation and I would say, okay, so you're interested in taking on, so tell me about what your comfort level is with projects. And they'd be like, huh? Okay, are we good with like painting, removing wallpaper? Are we okay with like maybe remodeling a bathroom, taking down a wall, gutting a kitchen? And a lot of times if you lead them down that way, you're kind of gradually getting to be more and more and more of a project, they're going to stop you. They're going to interrupt you. And they're gonna say, oh, you know what? I think that we were good at the wallpaper. Like we could probably do some wallpaper, maybe switch out some countertops, but like that's where we're at. My husband is not handy. And they will say those things. And then you maybe should like keep that to yourself, or as you explore the relationship with the people on whether or not you can give him a hard time for not being handy. And other times they're gonna say, no, we're kind of particular about how we like things. And I don't wanna pay for something else that someone else did that I don't like. I kind of do want a project, Elizabeth. Like I'm kind of okay with something that needs a lot of work, especially if we can get a better deal. But that way too, I know either I need to send you something turnkey and pretty ready to go, or I can open up the inventory and I need to probably be looking for some more of those project houses. Area in school, a lot of times there I'm capturing if it's that there's Woodlawn Park or Lenexa, or they really want to be in the Roland Park area or Brookside, that kind of stuff, and or capturing the school districts. And again, it'll be something, and maybe your all's memory is a lot better than mine, but be something that in that conversation, I feel like I'm always going to remember what it is that they're saying that they want. And yet when Shawnee Mission East, West, like I hear these are a big thing, like I live in Missouri. So I'm not, probably is, but I hear it's a big deal what school district, if it's Blue Valley West or Blue Valley Northwest or all of that different stuff, right? In the other section, can I pause? Is there any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yeah.
So both on the backyard and the school district, when you're in MLS, and this may be another class,
yeah,
but some of these things aren't really searchable, right? Like you can't search for a fenced backyard. Sometimes they'll have it in the description.
I wouldn't search for a fenced backyard because as most agents are going to note that consistently enough that I would hate for you to eliminate.
Right.
And with your MLS searches, if you put a criteria in there and it does not exist on that listing, it's going to not show you that listing.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a thing that you can put it in the description, but there's not a.
It might be. Yeah, I think fence would be more of like combing through and like, again, just mental note of we either need to make sure it has one or save money for one.
Well, and same with the school district, you can get to the district searching, but you can't necessarily get to the senior high school. It's on there so they can see it, but when you are setting up an automated
I can't wait to show you. Okay, so let me look here. We get to use the MLS next time. Okay. And I will show you how to search for both high school, middle school, elementary school, and how to add some additional fields that are not on that standard section. But yes, you can go down to the high school level.
Okay, good.
And they changed MLS, guys. And like when they changed MLS, they had like moved that around, which I just love that they changed MLS. But yes, you can search on high school.
Okay, great.
Again, no, when you do those kinds of things, and we'll talk about this next time, when you do those types of things, if they don't put a high school in, and let's say that you're specifically searching on Shawnee Mission East, and that agent was being lazy and didn't put a high school in and left it blank, that property is not going to show up for you. Oftentimes when they're searching for those school districts, as painful as it is, guys, I would go in and trace out the outline of the school, because I don't know if you've ran into them, but they're lazy agents out there, or some that are not maybe the most thorough. And I would have where clients would be like, why didn't this one pop up on my search? And I'd get frustrated, and I'd go in and see that it was blank and was like, oh no. And there's different tricks and tricks with that too. I used to do that one time and trace the school district, save it as a saved search. And the next time I had a new client that wanted Shawnee Mission East, I'd open up that saved search. I would enter criteria, and then I'd create a new auto email out of that. Does that make sense? So I wasn't tracing it every time.
You've got a list in the East attendance area. You don't put that down.
You are, but you know what? Those idiots are sometimes the best to co-op with, because usually you get to control the transaction, because you are not an idiot and you can help, you know, and or you're not an idiot and that idiot doesn't have as many people looking at the house. And so you're competing with that. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. But I'm telling you, people don't do it because they don't know. You guys, they're not always fortunate to be in places that they're like able, people are showing them and teaching them those things too. Or they enter the wrong one, okay? Because it was Shawnee Mission East or up in Parkville. Those boundaries have changed. And 12 years ago when it sold, it was in this school district, and now it's in a different school district, guys. So that's where like that, you gotta be careful. Okay, any other questions? All right. For other, in the other section, and this is where literally, guys, I had these printed out in my car on the colored forms. I had actually like a binder. I put 3-hole, I was real fancy, 3-hole punches. And I had a binder so that when I was out driving around and someone called and said, I want to buy a house, I'd say, okay, cool. I would pull over and I would get this out and have them to where I would remind me while I was there. But in the other section, I say, tell me a little bit more about what you're wanting in a house. Do you like to entertain? Is there someone that likes to cook in the household? Like, tell me a little bit more about those things, right? And that's where I'm taking note here of like, oh my gosh, my wife just loves to cook. She's gonna want a gas range. Or we are always the one that hosts family holiday gatherings. A dining room is a must. Like I cannot not have a dining room. And you'll have those clients, and you'll have clients that say, I could really give 2 cents about a dining room. I don't really need that. Or a pool or those kinds of things. So those are things I kind of capture in that other section. All right, on the right, you see moving date, guys. The reason that I have moving date here is I will say, okay, did you have an idea of when you wanted to move? And I often would say it in that way because I wanted to gather where their psyche was and where they were in their mindset. And someone would say, yeah, we were really hoping to move in April. Awesome. Okay, so you're wanting keys in your hand in April? Or you're wanting to like sign everything and pick the house out in April? And that's when they go, oh, well, I guess we were wanting keys in our hand in April. Or sometimes they'd say, we were thinking that's when we'd start to put in because we're going to get our tax money back and I'd feel more comfortable moving forward once I knew what that kind of looked like. So being able to differentiate between key and using that, when do you want the keys in your hand for the moving date? Sometimes too, they would say, we're thinking April, keys in our hands because our lease is up in April, right? So instead of just writing April in that box, I would ask a follow-up question. Do you know, is your lease up April 1st, April 15th, the end of April? When do you have to be out? Sometimes they would know exactly when they have to be out. Yeah, our lease is up the 30th. We got to be out on the 30th. Sometimes they go, oh, I don't really know. I don't know when we have to be out. And so that helps too. Because if it's April 1st, is April 1st a lot different than April 30th in your world? And you hate for that to sneak up on you later. To be like, hey, oh, I wasn't clear. Like, clock's really ticking because we got to be out by the 1st. So you want to know that from the get-go. If they don't know you're giving them homework, can you follow up on that and find out what our exact date is? Also, while you're looking at that, do you know, is there a notice that you have to give to your landlord for vacating? Again, an opportunity for you to provide value. They may say, yes, it's a 60-day notice. Or they might say, you know, I don't really know if we have one or not. Sometimes they're going to tell you beautiful words to your ears. We can actually go month to month after the 30th of April. And you don't know, if you haven't run into that before, why that's such a beautiful thing. It's because if you don't find them a house by April 30th, it's not like, oh, I guess we'll just renew our lease. You're out of luck for next year, kind of a thing. But those are good questions as the agent for you to know, because then you're able to then set up, what is my timeline? How fast do I have? right? Okay. Then from there, I often will say, why are you moving? If it's not obvious, right? We're moving because I'm just tired. We're ready to have some home ownership, make it our own. We're moving because he got a new job. We're moving because we want to be closer to my parents. We're moving because we're having a baby, like all of those things. If it's a stranger or not, guys, it's okay to ask those questions. Again, we're trying to find out more about these people so that when they get off the phone, they feel like we know each other and we're like friends, or like that they, I know them, kind of a thing. Okay. Underneath that section, I go into kind of the loan stuff. Often the times, the way that I handled this, if it was uncomfortable because it was someone I knew or it was a complete stranger, have you gone through that fund pre-approval process yet? Oh, no, or are you fortunate enough to pay cash? A lot of times people would either chuckle and be like, yeah, wouldn't that be nice to be able to pay cash? Sometimes people would be like, yeah, no, I think we probably will pay cash. Like, I think my parents might actually give us the cash and they're gonna, kind of a thing, or whatever it might be. And some people are fortunate enough to pay cash, but it was a kind of a nice way to get that out of the way and to clarify there. Or, okay, fine, you're gonna finance. Okay, have you talked to a lender yet? Yes. They're going to be able to provide you a little bit of guidelines, and you can ask some of these other questions on who that lender is and go down that path. If not, then you're able to say, okay, that's a really great first step for us. Can I introduce you to a couple of lenders that I really enjoy working with? That's usually how I decipher there. Sometimes if it's someone that hasn't talked to a lender and been down that path, depending on who you're working with and what your network looks like, some people are going to be really good about doing that before they reach out to you. And they're going to be able to say, Elizabeth, we really want to spend between $350 and $425, because they already know exactly how much they're putting down. They know what they want their mortgage payment to be, and they've been on the different websites looking at the different calculators, right? Other people are still in, if they haven't owned a home before, might still be in the mindset of what their monthly payment is. So meet them where they are, right? If they say, we've saved up about $16,000 to put down, or we've saved up about $24,000 to put down cash, and then we really want our mortgage payment to be, I don't know, like maybe like $1,500 a month or $1,800 a month, kind of. You can take that information to your lender and work backwards, or you can help provide that to the lender partner so they can have that conversation. I will tell you, when it comes to all of that, as much as you can, kick it over to your lender. You don't need to live in that world. You need to talk about interest rates with them a whole lot, other than they're moving. So let's get moving. But that is not your job to talk to them about all the different products they have. Let the lender take care of that, so that you're not getting in. And you can say a general, like, oh, okay, so you could do down payment of like 3% or 5% or 20%, and talk about some of the high level stuff, but really kick them over to the lender. But that's the section that we're capturing that. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions? At all helpful that it would be like to know? So I typically will say there's two different ways people go about their buyer consultation. Sometimes people get that phone call and they say, cool, come on into the office and we'll do a buyer consult. And they go through this sitting across the table from them in the office. So, and sometimes it's helpful if you want the input of both people, right? Other times I would do it over that initial phone call, depending on who the person was. And again, like how I was trying to build that rapport. So some of this I might go through that initial like search stuff and then hold off on the loan stuff or hold off on some of it until we met first, face to face. But I definitely feel like this is one that you can do kind of either way. Okay. If there are not any questions, then we will continue on. Any questions online, Amber, Connor? Great. Okay, you guys there's another form. Okay, so in that buyer consultation, oftentimes it is helpful if they haven't already talked to a lender to have them, if they have talked to a lender, have them go ahead and go over a little bit more of what those loan options look like. So, well, let's go through process flow first. My apologies, guys. I don't have any, I think I'm all good. I am renovating a house, I swear to God, and I get like the dust in my car, and it's good times. Please forgive me. Okay, process flow. I would have these forms, both orange and green, in the house with me at a open house, and I would literally go through it. I can't tell you the number of times people would be like, wow, you're taking really good notes, and you're really organized. Like, can I give you my contact info after all? Like, we'd like to work with you. The other thing I often would have in that open house, and that I would take to my buyer consults and my listing presentations, was a process overview. The reason being is to just kind of give them an overall, like if it's somebody's first time buying, they have no idea what to expect. If it's someone's third time buying, but they haven't bought in 13 years, they forget a little bit what it looks like. So that's the point of doing the buyer process overview. I have a much more detailed process flow as well that I'll save for another day. And yet that one was kind of more for like some of my engineers, some of my like consultants, like really deep, like I want to know all the details people. But a lot of times this was good enough to get us kind of started. And this is what I go through in an open house. So it starts with pre-approval and looking and begin looking. So it just shows that that's kind of the gateway that gets you into being able to go look at the houses. And then I talk, it goes over the initial offer and that you're putting your earnest money down at that time, typically 1%. So $1,000 or more. It's to show good faith. It's a negotiable amount. It is refundable during inspection. So I often will tell people that is something that does come back to you. And when we talk about inspections, I go through that. And then I explain to them that that initial earnest deposit goes towards their down payment. The other thing I learned the hard way with my absolute best friend is that I make it clear that they will deposit that check when we give it to them. Because she was like, well, I thought you said it went towards my down payment. I didn't realize they were going to actually like cash it. And I was like, oh, yep, points yourself. So make sure that when you tell, I know it sounds silly and we're doing a lot of EFT like transfer stuff right now, but that they know that they're going to deposit and hold it at the title company. Next, it goes through after initial offer, the sellers have a couple options. They can either accept that offer, renegotiate it, or reject it. And it just makes it clear that just because we make an offer doesn't mean that they have to counter us, doesn't mean that they have to accept it. If we were able to make it through that, then we go into inspections, and that's where I just do a high level. Typically it's 10 days, that's negotiable. It's a time for you to do any inspections, and you can cancel for any reason and get your earnest money back. We just move on. Note that here are some of the kinds of inspections that we do, and that the cost of it. I oftentimes too, in the market that we're in, this is where we start to talk about as is and how we sometimes have to make decisions on, yes, you can cancel or and get out, but they may not make repairs, kind of a thing. So a buyer can accept as is, renegotiate terms, or cancel the contract. I then just briefly touch on the appraisal. Again, the purpose of this is not that this is going to be their guiding light. It's just to give them an overall, like, this is how we get from point A to point B. So the appraisal, and that's something that's a deposit usually with their lender, and happens after, typically after inspections, a final walkthrough. They're going to make sure that any repairs you've negotiated for have happened. And then closing, which is where you're going to bring the rest of your down payment money and your closing costs. Again, so a lot of times this was just to do that overall, that I'm going to give you expectations. I encourage you guys, this thing is dated. It was made like over a decade ago. Please feel free to go into Canva or any of those lovely, like, you guys are so much better at it than myself, and make your own. The point being is doing this in an open house or doing this in an initial consultation if people are interviewing multiple people. That was again where people would go, okay, no one has asked me or told me anything about the process. Everyone just kept asking me how much I wanted to spend, and taking the time to show them that you're going to set expectations and provide that was always helpful. Okay, any questions there? I would highly encourage you that during that buyer consult, we're going to also take time to talk about contingencies and expectations on the market. What I mean by expectations on the market, right now, houses are selling quickly. What is your availability to go look at houses, kind of thing? We may need to make decisions within hours. So it's really important that we get through a lot of our homework, and that once you meet with the lender, that we really get comfortable with what your expectations are and how you feel in that price range of $375 to $425, right? There'll be some contingencies that we might bump into where other buyers are willing to buy a property as is. There's a couple different ways that people can buy properties as is. They can still do inspections, but they can't ask for any repairs, or they're not going to do inspections and they're not going to ask for any repairs. Or it's going to be like we just talked about traditionally, you can do inspections, renegotiate for repairs, kind of a thing. But that might be something we need to consider. And stopping and having a conversation with them then is helpful, because you can find out, oh, my dad's really handy, or my brother-in-law runs a remodeling company, I think we should be okay. Or you find out from somebody like, oh, wow, I've got no family here and I have no way of repairing any of the plumbing if it's bad. Or we really only have enough money, Elizabeth, for our down payment. I don't have a whole lot of extra cash to put in a new roof. Or do, a good amount of repairs, right? So that's where you get to kind of decipher how much room you have to play there, and you're not posing it after you've walked through the house and you're asking them to make a decision within 20 minutes on do they want to make an offer or not. And by the way, do you want to do it as is? So you're kind of setting the tone, but taking time to really stop and have a conversation about that would be good. Do you guys have any questions? I almost think that it would be helpful too, and you might consider having a copy of that as is addendum. A lot of our agents that I coach with on the plaza have buyer consultation packets that they have put together that they've bound that look really sharp. And that's some of the things that they've considered. So they know what that form looks like. So they know how it reads. And so that they're that much more comfortable when the day comes that they might need to use it. Taking the time also to talk about an appraisal contingency and waiving those. Do you guys all understand how that appraisal contingency piece works? In the past, prior to, the pandemic, very rarely would anyone ever waive the appraisal contingency or guarantee that they're going to bring money if it doesn't appraise. But basically now it's, again, explaining to your clients. Some people are getting so competitive in the market that they're saying on this house that's listed for $300,000, they will make the seller an offer for $350,000. And if for some reason it doesn't appraise for $350,000, let's say it just appraises for the $300,000, that buyer is going to bring an additional $50,000 to cash in addition to what they've already bringing as a down payment to make sure that the seller is whole on their offer. Sometimes it's 50,000, sometimes it's 5,000, right? Know where you kind of are in your range, but explaining to them that that's what other people are doing so they understand that that might be what they're competing against. When they get the phone call from you to say, guys, there was 12 other offers, we made it to the top 3. There was an appraisal contingency that was waived, and they were willing to bring, more to closing than we were able to offer. It lessens that blow and lets them know ahead of time, right? This is just something you can't do to compete. Or you would be surprised, guys, at how many people would go, okay, so it's good to know. So we would just if we made it for 300 or we made the offer for 320, then we could say we would make up 10,000 because I think we have an extra 10,000 that we could play with. And you can start to have conversations, especially if and you've had that conversation in that initial consult of how much money do we have saved for cash do we have for this, to know that okay, you saved up, I don't know if you're following, you saved up 40,000. What if instead of putting down 20%, what if we put down 10% and use that other 10% to do an appraisal waiver, or use that other 10% cash that we were going to use to put on a new roof so we could be more competitive? Does that make sense? Okay, and then sale and close, which is a whole nother thing that we will talk about a whole nother day, but that's if somebody has got their home that their purchase is contingent on the sale and close of their home. We're helping them understand that that may not be something that they may not have to sell their home, and they've got options to be able to buy without selling. Does that make sense? Okay, again, we talked a little bit about the loan piece and offering, either suggestions on who they work with. They are already pre-qualified, but it's through a Rocket Mortgage or US Bank, suggesting a local lender and explaining to them why that's important. You'll have some consumers that are going to just take and go with whoever you say to go with because you're the expert and I trust you. You'll have other people that will go, oh, okay, well, I'll give your person a call, and then they're going to go call their local bank anyways, right? And try to get a better rate. You will also, if you take the time to explain, does everyone know why a local lender can be more beneficial for a consumer? What we often would tell people, and because it's the truth, that when you work with a local lender, typically their underwriting is going to be someone that they're going to have a relationship with, that they work with all the time. They're going to take my buyer Jessica's file. They're going to look at it one time and say, here's what underwriting is needing these additional items. I, as a lender, could take it back to Jessica and say, Jessica, I just need these 3 things. And then you'll be all through, pretty much through underwriting. And you can take that back to the same underwriter. Underwriter says, oh, yep, looks good. She's all good to go. When you don't work with a local lender, they often work out of what are called call centers. And you may very well have where Jessica sends it into the loan officer that's sitting in Nevada. And that loan officer says, okay, great. Thanks so much for submitting all the documentation, sends it to underwriting, which might be in, Dallas. And Dallas looks at it and says, okay, here you go. Send this back to Jessica. We need these 3 items. Loan officer goes to Jessica, gets the 3 items. This time they send it into underwriting, but instead of going to Dallas, it goes to Atlanta. And the Atlanta underwriter looks at it and they say, that's great. I see Jessica got these 3 items, but now that I'm reviewing it and I have to put my stamp on it, I'm going to need 2 more things from Jessica. So then the loan officer goes back to Jessica and has to ask for 2 more things. And then they send it back, and guess what? It doesn't go back to Atlanta necessarily again. It goes back into a chute to some other underwriter somewhere else. And it gets to be very painful for the consumer. Also, a lot of times closings can be very last minute adjustments. And when you're working with a sizable company and it's not like a tight knit little local like lender, sometimes it slows the process where it's like, oh, nobody's in, or you don't have the ability to kind of make things move faster in that relationship piece. I can't tell you the number of times clients would tell me at the closing table, day of closing, and they waited until they're signing the papers. And they go, Elizabeth, we just want to let you know you were right about that local lender thing. We just wanted to tell you we're sorry, you were right. Thank you for sticking with us through this. We appreciate you. But it is nice to bring that up because people don't know. I mean, would you know if you weren't in the business that it's a lot easier to work with a local lender? The other thing, local lenders have reputations. Just like you're building a reputation for yourself in this business, lenders have reputations, both good and bad. So know who you're partnering with. But those with good reputations, I kid you not, as a listing agent, you see something come over with a pre-approval letter from a good reputation lender, it helps move that offer to the top of the table because you know Tanner gets his stuff closed. You know that that's a good lender and that they're going to they don't write bad pre-approval letters.
Hey, Elizabeth. We lost audio on the Zoom. Sorry to interrupt.
Now I'm muted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Connor. So I would encourage you to pull that appraisal just so that you're comfortable with it, so that you also in an emotional state and a rush aren't trying to review it. But maybe consider including that in your buyer consultation on that form. And note, different companies have different forms. So if you're the listing agent, be sure that you're reviewing every time you get one of those that come across. It's going to say what the amount, like if there's a dollar amount that you're bringing, or if it's up and like if it appraises below this number, you're not going to guarantee it, kind of a thing. So it gives you the option to say in there how much you're bringing and like what the
right. And I've used it and I've read it.
Okay. So in your example, and you said it appraises at 320, but you wrote it for 350, and you did your appraisal waiver for you're going to bring 10,000 to the table. So then those sellers would have to agree that instead of getting the 350 you told them, that they'd be willing to take 330. And if they were not willing to take 330, then they would move on, maybe possibly move on to the next person. So that would be what would happen there. As a buyer's agent, if you are including things like, hey, we'll bring an extra 10,000 to close and to cover an appraisal waiver, make sure that you're really clear with your client that they actually have that 10,000 and that that's not money that's coming out of the down payment. Because people get real excited and will start to say, well, I got a lot of money in my account. Like, I mean, I can do that. And yet that lender is counting on this much money being in the bank for loan to value, or this much for debt to income ratio, or all of their calculations. So a lot of times you want to get an idea of what that is ahead of time. And it's probably not a bad idea to fact check it, not because you don't believe your people, but with the lender and say, hey, I just wanted to give you a quick call. Like they're saying that we could do an appraisal waiver of 20,000. Does that shake out with what you've got? Or is that like, does that sound good if they take that 20,000 out of savings? Just to make sure you're not promising money that's needed elsewhere.
Okay. And you also use the example of, hey, I know you were going to put 20% down, but maybe we don't put a full 20%, so you can save some for an appraisal. But then that would really change the loan
Amount.
like PMI. I mean,
Correct.
Would you truly recommend
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yep, and I really would, because for some people, and Tanner Garver is our lender on the plaza, and he's talked about this before in our trainings or in our team meetings and such too. But yes, I would, because sometimes it's going to change their monthly mortgage payment by not a lot, and it's going to allow them to get the house. And there's some other stuff, especially if it's like they're buying one and then they're going to sell their house and then apply those funds. But yes, like it's a matter of doing math sometimes, where it's like, okay, instead of putting in Candace, this is again, I don't do the loan stuff. I'm looking at Candace because like she knows I say this all the time, where I'm like, I am not a lender. Go to coffee with a lender and bring your book of questions like this. Like, help me understand, does it make a big difference when they go from 15% down to 12% down, which might be the 6,000 you need for an appraisal waiver, or
And
the
you
6,000
could
you need
say,
for a fund.
let's talk to the lender to see what
Yes.
kind of a difference it would make. In your
Correct.
payment.
100%, like 100%. Like, yes, you totally want to throw it back at the lender and say, well, let's just, even if it's like you're trying to get them to go from the 375, they're stuck at what they need to only spend 375. But like, I know you can spend 425 and you're qualified for 425 just fine. Can we please just run the numbers on 425 so you can see your mortgage payment is not that much more. And the 425 house is completely and totally done. Unlike this piece of crap we're standing in that's 375, and you're going to spend a lot of money on new carpet and on painting and all that wood rot we found out it's all outside. Yeah, that's not cheap to fix. So like by the time we do all that, buddy, yeah, you're at 375, but then we have to add that stuff in, and then you're going to be at 422, and like you're used up a bunch of your cash, kind of a thing. So a lot of times I do, yes, use your, that's the reason they're your partner, right? And find one that you're good at, and that's patient, right? Okay, so then the other thing I would touch on, search instructions. A lot of times explaining to you, what do you guys use for your searches for your homeowner or for your clients? We MLS, we use, okay, is everyone, MLS is a safe place to say yes? Like I used MLS. It was the most accurate, easiest place to work out of. I often would say, I'm going to set you up on an auto email in the MLS. A couple different ways I can do that. And the MLS is now capable of allowing you to be like a concierge, where you have a stop that it comes to you before it goes to them, and you have to okay the properties to go to them. I oftentimes, especially when I was running a big book of business, didn't want to have to be the gatekeeper, and by any means, me, maybe being in an appointment and keep them from seeing a house sooner. So I just set it up to where everything would go out to them. So I often would warn them, I know you've told me that you want a turnkey house, so please don't get upset when you get an email from me and it's a grandma house, okay? Just note, I'm getting it set up so that you get the houses as quick as possible. Just disregard the house, the grandma house, okay? Apologize. I also would say, the way that I typically do, you can build lists in there. So if there's something you definitely want to see, you can make it, put a heart on it, and that way I can go in and see that you've hearted it and that's the house that you want to see. But just giving them instructions. Oftentimes, depending on what their time frame is, asking permission to put them on the auto email blast that they might get 16 emails in a day. Sometimes during that buyer consult, I'm saying, how often would you like to receive homes? I've got a couple options when I get into the MLS. One option is for you to get it as soon as it hits the MLS. So within minutes of it getting listed. Another option is I can have it sent to you just in the AM, one time in the AM, one time in the PM, or just once a day. Or I could send it to you just on Mondays if you're kind of just casually getting into your search, but asking for permission, because some people would be like, yes, it'd be totally great to just send me one email. Also, if they're searching across multiple different areas, sometimes I would set it up to where they're just getting an email in the morning and the afternoon. Does that make sense? But letting them know those expectations. If they are someone that volunteers to say, I only want an email once a day, Elizabeth, I also make a note and know that, so that when they come back and like, why didn't I see this one that just came up, like why didn't I see this one over here in Olathe? Well, because that one listed after your daily email went out. Note the way MLS works, guys, if you have it set up to where it goes out once or twice a day, anytime they click on that link, it's going to show them the most recent results. Even if does that make sense? You've got it set up to go out in the AM and something get listed at 1 o'clock in the PM. Anytime they click on the link even from the AM or from 3 days ago, it's going to bring up the most recent. Sound good? Okay. All right. And then I had one more note over here. Showings. I think it's good during your buyer consult to also set up expectations around showings. guys, I'm really pretty typically available to show, and I do a lot of showings around these times, whether it's you're going to set some boundaries and to say I typically will show anytime up until 7:30, but after 7:30, you know, it's really like it needs to be specific. Or typically I am able to accommodate showings with 2 hours notice, kind of a thing, setting those because I need time to let them know, I need time to schedule it. Sometimes, you know, there won't be overlapping showings, but letting them know how available you can be. I'm happy to show on Saturday or Sunday with advance notice. Sometimes I can add stuff on the fly, but really it's best that we really know all the houses we want to see before we head out. And if you haven't encountered this yet, bless you. Candace knows what I'm talking about, just through conversations with her. What I mean there is to set an expectation that you need all the houses before you go out. And so if we're going to set up a time and use an example. Okay, Jessica, so I'm super excited. Let's look through the inventory. Today is Monday. So if we were to go out Thursday, it would be really helpful if we kind of came up with all the houses that we wanted to look at. And I had those by like noon on Wednesday. That way I have plenty of time to get everything scheduled before we go out on Thursday. And the reason I say that, now I know Thursday houses pop up last minute, but to try to set that expectation from the beginning is good. Otherwise, they don't know the rules. And they don't know that oh yeah, we were going to meet to see that one house. You know, Jessica says, yeah, we were meeting to see that one house over in Roland Park. I saw this other one was at work earlier today, and can we go look at this one too? She doesn't know that it's not like a schedule on the fly thing, because you never set that expectation. Does that make sense? So it's really beneficial and helpful for me to have 2 to 3 to 4 hours notice to get stuff scheduled to ensure that we can get into it. Sometimes I can on the fly. If something pops up last minute, we can possibly accommodate it. But setting that expectation so that when you're standing in the house and you've got where you already scheduled another client behind her, and no, Jessica, we cannot go look at second house because I had you down for one house today. It's a little easier again to break that news and to be the bearer of bad news there. Does that make sense? Okay. Do you guys need like a moment of a break? We've got 30 minutes left. Are you guys doing okay? You look great. You guys look great. Okay. It's a little bit of the same thing when we go to the orange form. So again, orange because it's going to be for the seller side of things. Basically the same kind of a thing up at the top. We won't go through that section again. I do enter what their address is in that box to say street and the type. Again, if you visited their house, you know what kind of house it is and such. But if they have any list price expectations, so if they have an idea of what they think it'll sell at, I make a note there. Now, when I go through beds and baths, I do it a little bit differently. Again, you're asking them to describe how many bedrooms do you have? Someone might say, well, we have 4 bedrooms. Oh, great. Okay. So are those all up on the second floor? Or tell me a little bit more about where they located. Where's your primary bedroom? Is that going to be on the main floor or upstairs? If you're trying to gauge. Now, sometimes you've got a heads up or you've been to their house before, you know some of these things. Sometimes you got an email saying, hey, we might want to sell our house. You got to look it up in the MLS. You're going off of that old MLS record, so you know some of this stuff. You know it's a split level in Overland Park, and you've got some of it. But on the bedrooms, be careful too to get more information. Is one of the bedrooms in the basement? It's a good question to ask. Oh, okay, it is in the basement. Do you mind, is there an egress window? I don't know, an egress, like a window a fireman could come in and out of with all his gear on? Oh, no, there are no windows? Okay, so you now know that it's really a 3-bedroom with a non-conforming 4th bedroom in the basement. And when you're pulling your comps, you're no longer pulling comps for a 4-bedroom house in Overland Park, which can make a huge difference, right? Bathrooms, again, is when you're asking them to describe them to you. Oh, you have 2.5 baths? Awesome. Is one of those attached to the primary bathroom or not? No? Okay. I live in Brookside and did a lot of work in Brookside, and people would say, yeah, we're a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Okay, cool. Tell me a little bit more about where those bedrooms are. Well, we've got one up on the 2nd floor, and then there's we finished the half bath into a full bath on the main level. Oh, okay, but you just told me all your bedrooms are upstairs. So you come down your bathrobe, walk through the kitchen, take your shower. You do you. But I will tell you that affects the value of your house, right? So again, when I'm pulling my comps, are not pulling comps for a, that have bedrooms on both levels. It just is adjusting what comps I'm going to pull for my comp evaluation. Does that make sense? Again, with the half bath, is there, we've got 2.5 baths, or we have 3 bathrooms. Let's talk a little bit about that. They don't know the difference between a tub and a shower, and I wouldn't necessarily get into all of that granular, but basement, is it finished? Talk to me a little bit more about that. Kind of a thing. You're going to ask when you're doing your comps for a listing about the windows, about is it a walkout or a walk up? Does that make sense? Because when you're pulling your comps, especially if you do a lot of work in the Overland Park area, where that makes a big difference in some of those newer subdivisions kind of things. Does that make sense? Because a walkout is more desirable than just a full basement that doesn't have any windows. Go ahead, Candace.
I have a specific question.
That's okay. We're here for it.
Is it a walkout if it just has a door that's in the basement, like that goes to the backyard?
Yeah. Yep. So it's a walkout if you're in, and like, so sometimes if you've got like a side to side split, like maybe the kitchen won't walk out and you'll have a deck up there, but like that lower level might have it. But yes, that would be, it's a little bit of a stretch, but yes, a walkout means you've got a door and you literally, you're in the basement, you open the door and you walk out and you're flat on the land.
And it still adds value even if it's not a finished basement?
Yes, because it's finishable. In the times that we live now, somebody could add a short-term rental down there, or you could have a college kid, or could have a kid that go in and out down there. Entertaining wise, you've got like a patio and somebody could finish it out to be finishable space, right? But it makes it to where you can walk out a lot easier there. A walk up would be where you open that door, Candace, and then you've got like a little staircase you got to walk up, or a big staircase you got to walk
it's like
up.
4 stairs or something.
That's a walk up. That's not, that would be a little bit more. It's like a,
okay.
good friends had one of those.
Okay.
It's like a little bit of an in-between, but
okay. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. In the backyard too, I'm sorry. So in the basement, I'm asking about like, okay, we have a bar down there and you're taking those notes, because then when you do your comps, you know to go look for one that has a wet bar, right? Or we've got a bedroom down there. You're looking for comps that have those similar kind of things. Does that make sense? Garage, a lot of times where they're saying they've got 2 garages, or I've got 3, but one's underneath, that kind of a thing. Kitchen, I often will take a pause in the kitchen and when they say, okay, yeah, like obviously it's got a kitchen. You're like, why the heck does she have a kitchen on here? Like, they have kitchens. This is where I often will ask, and then the same thing with the bathrooms. People are pretty brutally honest about their house. And also they'll say, oh yeah, we updated the kitchen. This is where you're taking pause and asking them, well, when you say you updated your kitchen, did you update it in like 1998? Or like, are you just saying that you updated it at some point? Like, talk to me more about updated, right? And a lot of times people will be brutally honest and they'll say, oh no, it's pretty original. Like, it's pretty rough. Like we've got Formica countertops, or they're really proud because they did just put in quartz and the white cabinets or whatnot, which that's going to be crucial in the comps that you pull, so that you're going with better comps and better idea of what the value should be. And again, you can ask questions. You updated your house. Okay, tell me a little bit more. What are your countertops? We have stainless steel appliances or gas stove. Well, we have pantry pull out, kind of like you can ask those questions and kind of gauge what does it mean you've got an updated kitchen. When you go to the backyard, oftentimes I'm talking to them in the backyard. Again, entertaining space. Do we have a nice deck? We have a deck, but it needs to be power washed. I mean, it's kind of rough shape a little bit, like, I don't know. It's kind of shaky. I'm not real sure. Kind of a thing. And they are going to be brutally honest with you, right? They don't want to lead you astray most of the time. But also, like, if it's flat, anyone that does not have a flat backyard will often admit it to you over the phone before you go to their house. Yeah, it's treed, which is really nice because privacy, right? But I mean, it's like, slow. Like, I know we didn't really care because we didn't have kids and like we don't like to hang outside like bugs do, but like it's pretty good slow. That's helpful when you're pulling your comps to know that you're not going to compare it to the one that has a nice big flat backyard. You're going to try to find something that is similar, comparable, or take that into consideration in your value. Again, when I ask about updates, oftentimes this box flows into the other section. What updates have you done? Somebody that has done extensive remodeling to their house, they're going to tell you about how they refinished the hardwood floors, they painted the interior, the exterior. Oftentimes, this is also where the pride comes out and that gorgeous timberline roof, 50-year shingle comes out, right? Oh yeah, we put a roof on it 3 years ago. You wouldn't believe that ice storm. Oh my God, it was like coming in through the kid, and they want to tell you about the roof. They're also often going to tell you about the HVAC if they've replaced it, the water heater if they've replaced it, any of those items, the sewer line, if they've experienced replacing it, they're going to tell you. If they're not telling you about how they replaced it, they probably have not replaced it, or it's slipping their mind because it was 7 years ago. So oftentimes, if they don't tell me during that update section, then I'm asking, tell me a little bit more about the roof. What do you, oh, I don't know. Like it's the same one that was on when we bought it. So cool, because I'm looking at your MLS and you bought your house 12 years ago and it did not say new roof then. Or, you know, or, you know, I think we might have replaced that. God, how many, when was it? It was when Billy was born. Was it 9 years ago or whatever, kind of a thing. But you want to get an idea of that because that does affect your pricing. And it's something that lets you walk into the listing appointment with more appropriate costs. Okay, any questions there on kind of the information we're trying to gather?
House with 3 bedrooms, basement is finished. There's a room in the basement with the closet and it's walled off.
In the room that's in the basement, is there a window that a fireman with his gear could get in and out of?
But there's a walled off.
But yeah, so you got your window here, and I'm hearing you say there's a window well out there, and they got to climb up a little ladder in the window well. Yes, it counts.
And also on the
it needs a closet too, by the way. But yes.
On the pricing, he wants to sell his house, and then when you get the comp, it's like 200, 125. But he wants to sell it for 300. How do you?
Yes. So we worked, right? No, not necessarily. Part of it too, guys, on your comps, you're wanting to look at square footage too, right? And if you can, even if it wasn't in the MLS previously, you can typically go and find the tax record and it's going to tell you the square footage. So to be honest with you, in some neighborhoods, everything else might be selling for like 205, 225. And yet that's a 1,500 square foot house. And your potential client's house is closer to 2,400 square feet, right? And so yes, it can swing that much sometimes, depending on square footage, depending on finish, depending on if the ones that are selling for 205 have that backyard that slope, you know, that slopes off, right? There are things that can make that possible. Like you do need to go back and look at your comps, and we'll go over how to comp something. But square footage is something I would look at. Note that the value of square footage below grade, so underground, is less valuable than above. But that's why we're asking too, is the basement finished? Because sometimes when they bought it, it was not finished. Your tax record's going to show that that's a 2,400 square foot house. And then you were like, but when I talked to them, they said they finished the basement. I assume that they might have added another 700 square feet. So maybe we're looking closer at 3,000 square feet. I'm going to look for comps that look like that. But it really, I know that's a horrible answer and it goes back to my consulting days, but it definitely just, it depends on the house and the situation too. Okay, on the right, we're going to go through again, moving date. No problem. Good to see you today, Christian. On the right, we're going to go through moving date again. And that's where, okay, what day do we want to have, again, where are we handing the keys over? Do we need to get where we need to go? If somebody's relocating, they're going to say, well, we're moving out of the house, Elizabeth, February 29th, or 29th. That's because there's not 29 days in February. That'd be really fun. Not this year, but they're moving us. The movers are coming on the 28th of February. So like, we'll be moving the 28th. I don't think we want to put it on until after we're gone, or I don't know when it's going to start, like when we should put it on, kind of a thing. And again, why are you moving? It's always helpful, and just to fill that in. Again, with asking about the loan and paid off, this is often, especially as a newer agent, kind of an awkward question where you feel uncomfortable asking it. People are going to be either very open with you about it. Most people will tell you like, okay, yeah, we do have a loan on it and we think it's about $240 that we owe on it. Other people, if they don't want to tell you guys, just ask the question. If they don't want to tell you, they're going to say something like, well, Elizabeth, we want to kind of know what you thought it was worth before we told you what we owed on it. And I just laugh back at them like, oh, I respect that. I get that. No worries. I got my number here. We're good. We can keep going. It's cool. You don't have to tell me. It's okay. So don't be offended, but do ask the question, because sometimes it is very helpful to know that they only owe $240 on it and you already know it's worth $375 versus we owe like 360 on it, Elizabeth, because we've taken out second mortgages or we've got stuff going on in our world and kind of a thing. And don't practice your not shocked face when they tell you it's paid off, because more people than you would realize have their houses paid off for one reason or another. Sometimes they would try to ask if they knew who the lender was. That was less of a priority on the listing side of things. One of the things I did try to get out of them if I could was how much their mortgage payment was. The reason I would try to push to find out what that monthly mortgage payment was, if their mortgage payment is $2,200 a month, and we get down to where we're negotiating with somebody during inspections because they want us to do X, Y, or Z, or we're negotiating with someone, and I know the market's a little different right now, but we're $5,000 apart with a buyer and people are being stubborn. Knowing what that mortgage payment is can be helpful to you because you can use it to help explain to them how cash is going to flow. And to say, well, if we don't take this offer, I know you wanted to put it on for $300,000 and I was willing to go with you and do that. And now we've got an offer and I did good. I got to 260. Like, look at me. If they're being difficult to say like, okay, but I don't want to accept less. A lot of times I could bridge that gap by saying, okay, well, we could pass on this offer, but it might be 4 more months before we get another offer. And now 2,200 times 4, we're close to $10,000 just in mortgage payments, not to mention utilities, not to mention snow removal, that kind of stuff, right? But then I found $10,000 in knowing what that mortgage payment was. Sometimes when you're 5,000 apart, buyer and seller, as an agent, you can say, well, if we get him to close it before the 15th of next month, he wouldn't have to make next month's mortgage payment. So I just found $2,200. So really, we'd only have to come down another $2,800, and then we've got a deal. What do you think? It helps to kind of really understand what you're working with. Now, somebody says, Elizabeth, my mortgage payment is like $800. Like, I don't really care. Then you know that's not until we pull out your tool belt. Does that make sense? Okay. And then sometimes I'd have on here, and I would fill this out ahead of time if I knew when they purchased it, how much they purchased it for. And then the bottom was just where I would make a note, because again, my memory sometimes wasn't the best on when I scheduled the appointment for, when I was on the phone with them, and then when I was going to deliver my listing presentation to them, like pack it ahead of time. Okay, any questions on the seller piece of things? Okay, I've got, if not, the next form is kind of a fun one. Again, this is the one I would put on the yellow cardstock. The front of it is what I used when I walked through the house. So this again is just, all of it is like how I'm taking notes to be organized so that when I leave, I know what happened. Because I don't know if you can tell, but I'm just very present in the moment, and like a lot of thoughts are going through your head. I'm very much trying to read body language of a potential client. And so it's easier for me to take the notes and then whatnot. Okay. So basically the way that the front of this sheet is filled out is there's a box in the middle here that says room, ideas, who completes, needs from me. Typically when you're doing a initial visit to someone's home, even if you've already ran comps, they're going to give you a little tour, or you get to take a tour by yourself in bold. We often would talk before about how you would try to let them go around the house by yourself, because A, it would be a lot faster. And B, you're not nodding and going, oh my gosh, yes, I love the pink carpet. Yeah, new carpet, it looks great. Worse is when they painted the house the wrong color, right? They're like, we just had the whole house painted, Elizabeth. And you're like, and you pick the ugliest yellow that is clashing with every single thing you own already, not to mention no one wants. But yeah, oh great, you just painted it. Okay, excellent, right? So it's a little easier to hide that stuff when they're not walking around with you. But a lot of times too, it's a way to build rapport and to ask questions and for them to tell you stuff. So as you're walking around the house, they may very well go, oh yeah, I know we need to touch up the paint here around where we, added this light switch, and we're still we're working on, we know that we need to replace the carpet in this room, or what do you think about replacing the carpet? Like, do you think we need to replace the carpet? That is where I'm making a note, carpet. And like, so that I know, especially if they like, Elizabeth, our dogs have tore this carpet to pieces, we need new carpet. I'm making a note here, carpet. And then I make a little circle to know that I need to send them my carpet guy's information. That way, when I get back to the office the next day, I come back to this form where all the circles are, or where I know I need to go and send that contact info to the client. Does that make sense? Carpet guy, painter, plumber, because there's a leaky sink, or somebody to power wash. but I take and use this area to capture all of the projects that need to happen prior to listing that they're considering doing. Even if some of those projects they're considering doing, and it is okay for them to volunteer to do all of the projects. That is fine. You just need to know how to manage it to be able to follow up with them so that 2 months later you can say, hey, how's it going with power washing the deck and touching up all the paint in the basement and, you know, finishing the last little bit of drywall down there and the lights and stuff. I mean, if you know what to ask about. It also gives you the ability to say, okay, I know you guys said you were going to do all that, but would you like me to send my plumber over? Or I really do have a good drywall guy, he's super fast. And you kind of have notes on what it is that needs to be done. Does that make sense? And really, like the circle thing would be a lot of times you're like, you're having a conversation. Are you going to do it? Am I going to do it? Sometimes I would take all the notes as we're walking around in that section. And when we sat down and we started talking about timeline, which we'll talk about another day, we started talking about actually getting the house ready for the market. All the stuff that they volunteered to do as we were walking around, either they realized they didn't need to do and they could still sell their house for a lot of money, or they're now motivated to get their house on the market sooner rather than later because time is of the essence. And it's a little easier for me to convince them to let me send my painter over. If the painter could get all this painted for you and it was like $600, would that be better than you spending 6 weeks doing it? And then we go ahead and get going and get your, you know, go find your new house and get your house listed and then go, okay, yes. So makes sense that that's what that box is for. I'm beating I'm just beating that one to death. We'll just leave it at that. I'm still working on my PC-ness. I don't know if you can tell. Trying. Okay. On the right, you see notes for feature cards. And then it's like this whole section here, okay? What that is, the whole front of this is what you're walking around the house with them. You've got, like, I always had like an iPad with me. Now I have my like remarkable thing, but because then I was like a clipboard that I could write on. I think it is important, even if you guys are big iPhone people and you can type really fast and you think you can put it in your phone. The nice thing about having physical paper is that they see that you are making notes about their house and that you're like paying attention. And so as you're walking around the house, as much as I'm writing down, oh yes, we need to touch up paint here. And then the kids tore up the carpet here, so I need to get the carpet person down and I'm making those notes. Half the time your clients or potential clients are going to go, do I need to get something to write something down? Like, do I guess, I mean, the carpet, like I see it's all kind of adding up maybe. And I'll go, oh, it's okay. I'll send you a summary. I've got it. I'm taking notes here. And that calms them down. You're already taking care of them. You're already making it easier on them by doing that. Does that make sense? So that's part of that reason. With the feature cards. So it is lots of times a homeowner has put a lot of money into their house. They've replaced every doorknob. They went ahead and paid extra to get under cabinet lighting. Or their cabinets have pull-out shelves, which, you know, is a selling feature. If you were taking note of all those little things and you're in the kitchen and you're going, oh, it's beautiful, great double pantry. Like, do you care if I open that up and you're able to look to see, oh, it's got pull-out shelves. Let me make a note of that. Oh, beautiful gas stove. Okay, let me make a note of that. I would be doing and taking those notes as I walked around. Oh, did every bedroom have a ceiling fan? Because we're in new construction land and I know that those are things that you probably paid to put in afterwards. Okay, yeah, okay, let me just make a note. And I would do that so many different rooms. And then pretty soon I'd say, so just so you know, I'm taking these notes because when I list your home, I have little feature cards I put up around the house just because I want to make sure everybody else sees all the little details you've got in your home. So many times they're like, oh, if you are competing and someone else is not taking that level of detail, they're going to nod and notice that too, right? The other piece is if I'm doing a really good job at that initial walkthrough of capturing all that, the beautiful thing is when it's time to list their house, what do? I pull out my yellow, card that I'm so proud of. And then I make my feature cards off of that. And it makes my process so much easier. I don't have to go back to the house and try to figure out again, what are all the things I can point out about this house. So it helps my efficiency as a listing agent. Sound good? Some of the stuff I was pretty like feature card wise that I'm taking note of are some pretty basic stuff that you're going to be like, duh, like a single bowl sink. If I'm in a price point where a lot of those buyers have been living in rental land and they've got like that shallow sink that it's paying to wash dishes in, I'm going to point out the deep sink that's there, right? The 5-burner gas stove, that's a nice upgrade. I'm going to point that out. If it's that you've got a fenced backyard, I'm pointing that out, those kinds of things. I often, my other speech with the feature cards, I'm not going to be here the day that the buyer's agent's walking through or the buyer's walking through more than likely. And so this allows me to not depend on the buyer's agent to point out all these things, because I kind of like to make sure that like we're really marketing your house, and I don't like to depend on them to sell your house to the buyer. Okay. The back of this form, guys, so page 2 of this, often is where I'm taking notes about the actual go live, like, and some of the preparation for listing the home. Sometimes the upper left box, decision date and follow up. So in that buyer, that initial consultation, I would say, is there a date in which you're going to make a decision by? I'm going to make note. Is it okay if I follow up with you? So, okay, so you guys wanted to talk about stuff. Today's Monday. Is it okay if I follow up with you Wednesday morning? Does that give you enough time? Kind of a thing. So I know, again, what it is I've communicated there. On the right, I have staging. I always did staging previews for my clients, to which I would have a stager come through and tell them how to move their furniture around, what to get rid of, that kind of a thing. Sometimes prior to going to the listing appointment, I would call my stager because I had a good relationship with her, and I'd find out what her next 3 appointments were. And I would have them on here so that in the appointment, if things were going well, I could say, well, guys, if you want to go ahead and sign the listing agreement, I could go ahead and my stager's available. Today's Monday. My stager is available Wednesday. She's got Wednesday, 6 o'clock, if that would work. Or she said she could do Thursday at 7 or Saturday at 10 a.m. If you want, I could go ahead and sign the listing paperwork and go ahead and get her out here, kind of a thing. So that was a way that I would kind of use that as a motivator. Same thing with the photographer. So I have a section over here on the left for availability for the photographer. The rest of this is where a lot of times I either in the appointment, depending on the time frame of how quickly they're getting it on the market. If it's a vacant house because they're getting relocated, or is a rental property that they now want to sell and it's completely vacant, we go ahead and start, like, especially if I was filling it. Okay, so I can get my photographer out here. I'm pretty sure I can get her out here. Are you good with going on the market on Thursday? And those were good days, guys. When you got calls and they said the house was vacant during that initial, again, like with the listing, I'm going through a lot of the orange before I get to the house so I could pull the right comps. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm there. If it's a vacant house, I know, like, I could have this thing on the market by this weekend if it's empty, right? That's where I'm making my call to my photographer ahead of time. But that's where I'm saying, okay, and we'll talk about timelines. We have a whole nother training dedicated to that, but talking about when showings would start. And this is where I'm just kind of making notes of when will we go in the MLS, do an agent tour. Some of it is still to trigger in me to make sure that I'm asking those questions and prompting me to do those things. Key. Do you know how many times I go to list a house and I then forget to get a key from them, and I'd be rushing around trying to get a key or a copy of a key made with them when I would drop off the lockbox, the feature cards. Some of this was more planning for me on my part and keeping track of it, especially as I added leverage and had assistants that were doing things for me. On the right, you have how best to contact the client. And then I have on here name, age, and birthdays, and that's for if they've got other humans living in the house or animals that maybe are particular to them, to say, how old is, you said Billy was born 9 years ago when you put that roof on. How old is, is Billy, what's that kind of a thing. If you wanted, some of you guys are Buffini people, and that's a good way to try to capture that information at the listing appointment so you can use it going forward. At the bottom, that bottom box, we'll use that a lot when we're talking about showing time as a listing agent. So this is where you're saying, how are we going to set up showings? And again, depending on where they are in the situation, this might be a phone call later. If it's someone that's got a vacant house and they're ready to list it right now, then sometimes you can, you'll be going through this at that listing appointment, right? They've signed the listing agreement, and then you're going to say, okay, for showings, we're gonna go live on Thursday. Do you want them to text you, email you, or call you for those showing approvals? You're good with text. Explain them a little bit how that works. And then the types of showings, we can set it up to where they're just a go and show and they can immediately come see the house, or they have to get your approval. You're asking those questions and you're taking note of here. Time restriction. Typically, that is a good thing to either talk through on the phone if you're listing later, if you're listing that day. When do you want showings to start? And sometimes it's like during the week, showings can start at this time and end at this time. On the weekends, showings can start at this time and end at this time. So sometimes that's different. You want to break it out that way. Length of appointments, guys, that's where you and the setup can go in and restrict how long somebody can have a showing for. in the heat of the pandemic days, the early days, 15-minute showings, I would have never, if somebody would have told me that like 4 years ago, that you would have to show a house in 15 minutes and like have a 15-minute window to see a house, I would have never believed them.
No overlapping appointments. It's like,
I would have been like, you're crazy. Like, who would do that? Like, that's not like, no way, maybe somewhere else. But so that's the length of the appointment. You can restrict it so it's 2 hours down to 15 minutes. And then notice for appointments. And that's where you're just saying, how long will you need to get out of the house? And then they'll often ask, for example, like, what do you mean? Like, would an hour be enough time? Or do you need more like 3 hours to gather the animals and get out? And you're just taking note because you have to enter that when you set up the showing, restrict the showing stuff as a listing agent, okay? Finally, this is not one so much that you ask your clients, but do you release the feedback to them immediately? That's more of an internal question and just somewhere for you to make sure that you're noting that. And we'll talk about that when we set stuff up, why that's important to be a gatekeeper. Yes, Candace?
I just have a quick question about how do you approach them in regards to like touring your house, saying like, they're telling you about crown molding that they were going to put on.
Yes.
So is that something you say, oh, like, okay, hey, are you going to get that fixed? Like, look nicer? Or I don't know. Like, how do you approach them about getting stuff done that you notice, but not necessarily that they're looking at, or you even ask them? I think that's really awkward to ask them to spend money on a home that they're trying to
I think, okay, it's going to depend. And I think Rebecca Green, who operates out of our office now too, and she did a great job. I don't know if you guys were on that the other day when she did her listing presentation. Go back and watch it if you weren't. You watched it twice? No, you're good. Okay. She had a good point that she does not point out or tell them that they need to do any of those things until she gets a listing agreement signed. Because she wants to be their best friend. I was a little different and approached it a little differently, but I did have an aha moment in the way that she handled things. And she listed over 100 houses in a year, so maybe she knows what she's talking about. I think it's important though that you do set those expectations and that you do have a conversation about it in some senses. Her thing was like, I'm gonna walk around the house and just nod. Like, am I gonna make note of the huge crack that's in the ceiling of the living room? Yes. I'm gonna make a big deal out of it until they sign on the dotted line and we're like besties. No, was her approach. I often would say, okay, so what's going on with the crack? Like, has it gotten worse since you've owned the house? Has it gotten like, what's the story here? And I do think that it's good to set expectations because no problem. See you later, Craig. I think it's important too that you're making sure that they're aware that like it's a big deal. Or if you see the huge slope in the backyard, or that it's a mud pit because it's so shaded and there's no grass growing, that like this might be something we get pushback from. Or your house sits on a really busy road, so no, it's not going to be worth as much as the house down the street. But yes, like if it's the carpet, Candace, you either can deal with it ahead of time, even though it might be awkward to be like, so you guys don't like to take your shoes off or like wipe your feet off or any, like this is just okay. No, I'm just kidding. A lot of times though, it's going to come up later and people know. Most of the time people do know that there's an issue and you get to present them. Everything you do with your clients, it's their decision. Right. You are their advisor. I see that the carpet is a little bit worn. I don't know if we had someone come in and wash it, if it would perk up enough that we could get it sold. And I know things are selling quickly right now, but here's what I see as your option. We need to at least have it steam cleaned. Like you need to at least have somebody come in and steam clean it. We can get a bid for that. We could have someone come give us a bid for how much it is to replace it. My guesstimate on it, having sold a couple, is it's probably $4,500 to get all the carpet replaced in here. This is the pros to that. You get to be in charge of what quality of carpet you're putting in. We don't have people discounting the house and you get to walk through, or we do nothing, but we got to price it accordingly. And then you get to walk through what those options are. Like, yes, I'm asking you to spend $4,500 to replace the carpet, but what does that mean for you? Do you have the $4,500? Well, yeah, I mean, we do, but like we're wanting to sell the house. Well, if we go ahead and replace the carpet for $4,500-ish, then a buyer coming in isn't going to think about how many animals have been living here and what other damage they did to the house. There might be a different aroma. No, I don't know. Like you do the aroma thing your own time, right? But also, a lot of times I go through and say, we go ahead and replace the carpet for $4,500. We're in charge of the quality of what carpet we put in. If we leave it to a buyer, the buyer might say, I don't want that builder grade carpet, which is $4,500. I'm going to replace the carpet. I'm going to put new pad down. I'm going to put this quality, like I'm going to live here for 12 years, like, 15 years. I'm going to put in more expensive. My carpet I'm putting in is now $8,700. Or in a buyer's mind, like, God, that's going to be, I don't know how much carpet would be. And they're starting to spiral on having to pay for the carpet, which money they may or may not have. Plus, they're going to say, I'm not paying top dollar for this house that has crap carpet. So they're going to discount the house down, even though you've already discounted the house because of crap carpet. So you got a double discount against you. Half the time when you walk people through it that way, they're like, all right, so I guess it makes sense. Like we should put the new carpet in, right? I'd rather people come in and see new carpet. We're in control of the quality and the cost of that carpet. Then people come in and it be a deterrent, and then we're losing buyers.
Have you ever gone to a listing all the time? They have a whole room, living room,
in the living room?
Yeah, it was out across from Southwest, Valley Southwest.
They have a tree in their living room?
But it was in a pot?
Yeah, but I mean, it was gigantic.
Yeah.
Leaves were
Oh,
all-
Yeah.
And I knew I wasn't getting this listing because she goes, what would she need? That's what caught my eye. I go, well, I'll get you this unique. She goes, you don't think it's like a good selling picture? I don't know anybody else that has it. So, it's ridiculous.
I thought it was in the ground growing out of it.
That's what it was. And it was huge.
But it was.
I mean,
So often though, I would, in that moment would explain that our goal is to get your house to be as neutral as possible to appeal to the most number of people. And I feel like right now, especially since you're going to take this beautiful thing with you, right? It's not staying, right? So like, I want them to focus on what is staying about the house and not be distracted. And that's when I would go to like, and I mean, you've got great vaulted ceilings and this fireplace is gorgeous. Well, I can't think about anything but this tree right now. And they're missing out on all these beautiful features of your home that are going to help us sell it for more. And right. And I would say, and to be completely honest, like but I would go there at the risk. A lot of times, guys, when you're out, you're going to find that you're walking a line of, hey, I could either not say anything and I'm not going to get the listing because we're not jiving. And I kind of feel that already, or I'm going to do it in a very tasteful way. And it was something that I will toot my own horn. I feel like I was very, very good at finding a way to tastefully say, hey, maybe let's get the tree out of here. And then it's going to show how much more square footage and how much bigger your square footage is. Because we are competing with other houses that aren't split levels. And I want to show off as much openness and square footage as possible. But going and having that awkward conversation with them about the carpet that needs to replace or the whatever it might be, a lot of times if you can do it tastefully, you can explain to them why and what their options are and the pros and cons of those options, and then they realize they get to make an educated decision. They are grateful that you didn't just stand there and not say anything about the carpet, right? And you gave them options and help them make a better decision, because this is what you do every day. They don't sell a house. Sometimes people don't sell a house for 10, 12 years at a time. And they can't see beyond isn't it a statement? It's a great conversational piece when people come over. And the best line too is, well, there's a difference between living in your home, which is very comfortable and cozy, and selling your home.
Right.
And that was always a good line, whether it was a tree growing or they had 6 recliners
Or like
and a million things.
furniture in like your bedroom
Yeah.
or whatever, like that just does not fit in the door.
All right, anybody, thank you so much, guys. I'm excited for tomorrow afternoon. It'll be fun.
Thank you.
MLS tomorrow. If you guys want to bring computers too, feel free to bring your computers. And we're on the plaza tomorrow. Does everybody know how to get to the plaza? Anybody? Everybody?
2:30 to 4:30.
Yeah. All you OP people, we were so excited to have you on the plaza. Do you guys want me to just go up and show you where there's common space you guys can work while you're here?
Yeah.
You'd like that? Okay, let's go do that.
Was one of these place supposed to be a seller's process overview or?
Nope. Do you know what the trick was? Bye, Connor. Bye, Angela. Bye, Vicki. The trick was these 2 logos.
Oh, I see.
So I had them for. All right. Hi, Vicki. Okay, I'm gonna have a signing sheet of these counted tomorrow. Carlos, did you have a good weekend?
Yes.
Yeah, anything fun?
No, just working.